Hello, welcome to the channel and thanks for joining me. Today we're going to take a look at the Hitachi TRK-8600 Radio Cassette Recorder. And the purpose of this video is really to be a video archival record of the functions and features of the model. I'll also give a quick demonstration of the radio and the tape in action a bit later on as well. And this one wasn't without its problems. It did require a little bit of work, so I'll include a little bit of that shortly too. Now, I have featured other Hitachi TRKs on the channel, so do please check out some of those as well, in addition to my vintage electronic games, 8-track players, Walkmans, all that kind of stuff. And around 80% of my viewers are not subscribed, so if you would take a moment please to hit that subscribe button, it'd be massively appreciated and it would really help us to grow the channel and reach a wider audience. Thank you very much indeed. So back to the unit itself then. It dates from around 1981. And it was blessed with no less than 26 watts of music power. It weighs in at 8.5 kilos, so thick end of 18 pounds. And to give you an example of the size of this thing as well, I have a Sanyo cassette player from around the same time. This is an M550, and you can see how the unit absolutely dwarfs the tape player of the time. So this one is really quite a beast, it has to be said. So where do we start with this then? Okay, well, as I say, it's a radio cassette recorder, but it has a really nice soft touch cassette mechanism, which I'll show you shortly, and 3 speakers per side. So you've got your woofers, mids and the tweeters across the top, in addition to the built-in condenser microphones just hidden away in there as well. So onto the unit itself then. It has a master switch from tape to radio to line-in stroke phono. So it has legitimate RCA inputs with a ground point, so you can play your records through it as well with a built-in phono preamp. It has a level and tuning battery meter switch, so you can choose from battery strength and indeed tuning strength for the radio through to a power output display should you require. There's also stereo mono switch and a Dolby on-off switch for the cassette mech. And in terms of the tape there, you've got your Type 1 normal or your Type 2 chrome, and it will even handle your Type 4 metal tapes, as boldly emblazoned there via the logo on the cassette door itself. With regard to the VU meters, as I say, the left one carries the battery strength, the right one for the tuning strength for the radio, and of course both needles to display power outputs if the switch is selected for it. As for the recording level, you can set it to full auto, and if you wanted to do manual control of recording level, you've got independent left and right recorder volume controls just to the side there. As far as the sound is concerned, you've got your left-right balance sweeping potentiometer, you've got a 2-way EQ if you like via a bass and a treble. You've also got a fiendish loudness button, which really does drive that bottom end. It really makes the thing thump, and yeah, it really gives it some kind of kick, I can tell you. Now the master volume is just on the side, and below that is your band selector switch for your radio, and you've got FM, shortwave, medium and long wave. And you can also just see on that panel as well the tape counter and then the eject button built into the side. There's also a headphone socket built into the front, so if this unit is mounted, as I say, it's a large unit, so if it's mounted on a shelf or into a cupboard hooked up to, for example, your record player, then it's easy enough to plug your headphones in and out without having to sort of plug it in and get it in all around the side or something like that. In terms of the side though, you have got speaker outputs, variable impedance outputs for those, you've got microphone inputs, as I say, you've also got your auxiliary inputs for your phono and a 5-pin DIN as well for integration with other units, so quite versatile in that respect. The handle on this is pretty sturdy and strong. I think it's made of an anodised aluminium in rather an attractive bronze finish to match this particular unit's colour scheme. And a pretty long aerial on this as well, a retractable 3-part aerial, which I've polished up and cleaned up now, so that's quite nice too. So this particular unit wasn't without its problems, and I'll include a link to the original unboxing video in the description below. But one of the main problems it had was that the input for the AC cord was broken, and it was quite rattly, and it meant that you couldn't actually plug the cable in properly. It all broken inside. So I've addressed that. Also, the cassette mech didn't work at all. and it did need all new belts. I'll give you a quick whistle stop tour of that particular work in a moment, but there's 4 belts in this, so that's now been sorted. It's had a deep clean and a polish. The only thing I couldn't fix on this that you may see from the original unboxing video was that there's some distortion in the tuner window, and it's obviously had a little bit of heat at some point. I think it's been sat probably in a window or something like that with some targeted heat, and it has deformed and slightly melted the tuner plexiglass and a tiny little bit of the front panel as well. Now, I was half inclined to try and heat that and bend it back into shape, but you know how sort of over flexible acrylic can be when it's heated. I didn't want to make a bad situation worse, and this is, you know, a 40-odd-year-old machine now, and they all have their battle scars from along the way, and I'm quite happy to just let sleeping dogs lie with that. It doesn't affect the functionality of the tuner, and it's not that awful to look at either, to be fair, especially in context with the rest of the machine, which is really beautiful. So there it is, the Hitachi TRK-8600E. I'll put the radio on shortly and the cassette, but first let's take a quick look at the kind of work that went into getting this thing working again. So the first thing, of course, is to take a little look around. We've removed the front case, the transport controls, and indeed the cassette mech. All the knobs and switches have been removed as well, so we can keep everything nice and organised and see the scope of works. Now, the first thing, of course, was to repair that broken AC inlet, and you can see that the battery springs are all mounted and connected to the rectifier board, but fortunately the pieces that had broken off were still rattling around inside, so I was able to glue those back in place and also flood them with resin as well, so it'll give it a nice super reliable junction for a bit later on. There are actually 2 mechanical fixings, and both of those screws were able then to go back into place and hold it securely. Next job, of course, is cleaning up the belt residue. Always a fun job on these boomboxes. Of course, it takes longer to remove the old broken belt residue than anything else, generally speaking, so having a bit of a poke around here and seeing what we're up against. There's a bit of low-hanging fruit on this particular one, by means of one of the belts was actually almost intact, so far easier at this stage to try and unpick it as best as we can. Now, it was already kind of degrading and broken, as you can see, but nonetheless, anything we can get off in one piece means we don't have to swipe and smear it away with alcohol later. So again, just picking away at it, and you can see the kind of mess that we're up against on this. In fact, it got even worse than this. This is about halfway through, but you can kind of see where the time and effort goes when you're cleaning these mechanisms up. And then it's a case of baby wipes, alcohol, whatever it takes to physically move and also sort of dissolve the belt residue. All done now, so now's a chance to get the backing plate off. I used a Sharpie to colour code these 3 screws on the back of the plate here. As it transpired, we only needed to remove 2 of them, but it's always nice to know. I've not worked on one of these before, so it's always good to make sure that you've put everything back in the screw holes from whence they came. So there we go. Now, the only thing with this was it was held in with a fair amount of dried old grease, which had turned a bit to treacle, so it needed a bit of jiggery pokery and persuasion, but finally it did pull clear. And you can see now that we're getting the 3rd of the 4 belts off. The counter belt is the bottom right of screen, that's still there, we'll get that later, but for now this one's on its way out, and we're just teasing it away here, desperately trying not to break it. Far easier to get it off in one piece if we can here than to have to pick all the dissolved broken remnants out from inside the pulleys later. So again, a bit more playing and spinning around with the belts, and that one's clear. Marvellous. And now we're just putting things back together, so getting rid of that old grease, dissolving it away as best we can, making sure all the parts are moving freely, and especially in the little pinholes and things like that, just making sure everything's clean and free of grease. You can see some of that orange treacly grease just there, so that will all get cleaned away. And now we're on to the tape path, of course. Always good to get in here whilst we can. So we're starting with the erase head, and then moving on to the play and record head. Both look pretty clean, but as I say, always good to get into those whilst we can. I'll also clean the capstan at this stage, and indeed the pinch roller itself as well. The pinch roller felt quite supple on this, so it didn't need to be replaced. Just had some surface ferrite on there, so a couple of minutes off camera, sort of wiping and digging away at that, brought that back to a pretty good standard and certainly good enough for reuse. So finally then, we're just going to put a drop of light machine oil onto the motor spindle, let that sink in, spin her up a few times because it wouldn't have been used for quite some time. So time to put everything back together. I've got a Deck-Tech precision belt kit here. I'm not sponsored by Deck-Tech, but their products are superb and their service is second to none in my experience. So all the belts are on now, and just doing a bit of a run-up check, checking for tension, checking that all the pulleys are moving correctly and that the mechanism generally is performing as it's supposed to. So we'll get the back plate back on. Those two screws can go back in now. Yes, they were colour coded. As it transpired on this particular example, they were both the same screws, but nonetheless, it's nice to put every screw exactly back from where it came from. That way there are no nasty surprises later. So again, a final run-up check now that the backing plate's back on. The flywheel's turning nicely, as are all of the pulleys and belts. Super happy with that. So back into the main casing it goes. There were about half a dozen different multi-plugs, but they're all back in now, making sure the cables are clear of any screw or pathways so that we don't trap them later. And also just having a general look around, making sure everything's neat and tidy, clean and organised. I also took this particular example opportunity to clean and polish some of the scratches out of the tuner window as well. So just kind of working away here, making sure there's no nasty surprises or anything obvious that we might have missed. So once these screws are in, it will just be a case of checking the motor speed via a calibration tape, making sure that everything's working well, the audio is working well, the switches are clean and all done. So let's take a little listen.
At Wiltshire Cinemas, they were showing, controversially, A Clockwork Orange, Diamonds Are Forever, less controversial, James Bond, and Fiddler on...
The windows wide. Now you're fed to fight, the things are looking brighter, let it go tonight.
So there's the radio then, you can hear the FM stereo, it's super clear and really rather nice. Let's take a look at the cassette deck then. Let's have a listen to that now. And I've just moved the microphone back to face me, but I wanted to just show you quickly the lights on the soft touch there. You've got your play light is green and the pause is indeed red. So if I press this pause again, very nice indeed, and eject, there we go. A soft eject, but not too soft. You haven't got to wait all day for it. So there it is then, there's the Hitachi TRK-8600E. Just a quick show and tell, like I say. Hope you've enjoyed the video, hope you found it useful. I'll be back soon, but do stay safe in the meantime. I'll see you then. All the best for now. Bye bye.